I want to talk in-state recruiting.
Okay.
Because it has been kind of a wild turn the last few days with the particularly Chase Loftin, the tight end from Elkhorn North that transferred to Millard South. Number one player in the state by On3.
Okay.
The only player by On3 in the top 300 right now in the state. Picks Florida State, and that was almost a surprise. I think a lot of people thought A&M or Missouri. It never had, for whatever reason, a great feel for Nebraska, and you can say a lot of things. His father played for Iowa, number one, so they're not a Husker family.
Okay.
He's got a brother at Kansas State, but you look at the current roster. Two of the highest ranked tight ends in recent history just came through this area on the Husker roster.
Mm-hmm.
Carter Nelson, Thomas Fedoni.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of rankings, those guys are higher ranked than Chase Loftin was. So the opportunity at Nebraska was good, but the other missing piece is the winning. Nebraska obviously has not won in a bowl game since 2016.
Yeah, I've read some stuff about Chase Loftin's decision. He mentions going to Florida State and competing for a natty, which would be hard here right now. And then he even mentioned the weather. And I go back to talks with Jay Norvell. Remember Jay Norvell?
Oh, yeah.
He was the offensive coordinator here. He
head coach at Colorado State.
Head coach at Colorado State. He wrote a book about receiving, and he would always say it's going to be hard to get the real top end receivers here. Now Chase Loftin's a tight end, but they'll split him out wide, and he said that the Florida State plans to use him out wide, especially early in his career. And Norvell would always say it's hard to get the real top end receivers to cold weather places. You can do it. Obviously, it happens, but it's harder. Loftin, you mentioned something in your rundown, Sean. Florida State doesn't come into Nebraska very often.
No, I've only found in our databases at both Rivals and here, I track all the offers over my career, and there's only 6 Florida State offers ever made in the state of Nebraska, dating back to 2000. And the first one wasn't until like 2020.
And then how many since 2021?
So a total of 6.
Yeah, and then none since 2021, right?
Well, Bellevue West had a few, like Xavier Betts.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Ducker Riley. There were some guys like that were offered. Now the question is, how many of them were actually committable?
Yeah.
Were they pushing you?
Right.
Like they wanted him. You might get that like phantom January offer, but it may not be an offer in June.
Yeah, you mentioned his brother at Kansas State. The Florida State tight ends coach had a relationship with his brother. So there's a long-term relationship between this Thompson's his name and Chase Loftin, and that helped Florida State. So yeah, Sean, here's the thing that Nebraska fans are going to have to look at. You lose the top-ranked player in the state. You might lose the second-ranked player in the state too, Christian Jones.
The question of Christian Jones is like, we don't know this. Is Oklahoma or Auburn pushing for his commit? And if they're not, is Nebraska? And is there going to be any pressure for him
to commit before the season starts?
Or is he going to be able to take it into the season and try to wait on Wisconsin and other teams? I just don't think there's much of an opportunity to take your recruitment too deep into the season. You want to get a spot somewhere now. And then if circumstances change, then you could maybe look around. But I think you're always rolling the dice if you wait now, because coaches can't even go on the road in December this year. They can go out for their bye weeks and watch you play games somewhere. So it's just a different calendar of events. Coaches in general and the way they'll be out on the road will be different this year than ever before. So for a lot of these guys, that's why there's an urgency to get this done with right now.
Yeah, I think just the leverage anymore, to drawing it out deep into the fall. Like, I think those days are gone, unless you got to be like the right guy that has the right teams invested in you and are willing to let you take it that far. And sure, Christian Jones is probably one of the top remaining in-state targets now, but does he have that leverage?
Inside linebacker. I hate to you throw around the term dime a dozen, but not a premium position. And that's what he is. He's basically an inside linebacker. The other part of the discussion is what I raised. I'd ask you guys, Rob, is that a concern if they would lose the top 2 players in the state?
Optics wise, yes, because it doesn't happen very often. But Matt Rule has offered more in-state players than any coach in Husker history. I mean, remember that.
It's a good balance of conversation.
It's not like Matt Rule's not tried.
No.
Do you think Scott Frost would have offered Connor Booth before his junior year?
Connor Booth is the running back at Wahoo New.
No, I mean, so they see a metric in a guy and they offer him. And
Right.
Connor Booth ended up leading the state in rushing last year.
Right.
But they believe in their evaluation tools, and they'll make offers on guys before anybody even thinks about, like Jace Reynolds, currently at Elkhorn North, 2026. They offered him before anybody even thought about offering him.
That's a good balance.
And so they have an approach that they follow with these guys, and they believe in their evaluation system. And a lot of it is your testing metrics and your measurables and your upside and what you can do. Because then if you have those things, they believe they can make you even a better player.
Yeah, I think the only, consequence would just be the fan base optics, like just from the fans that, getting in-state talent is such a big deal around here, especially when you got guys that are legitimate Power 5, Power 4 level players, then they go elsewhere. That doesn't sit well with a lot of people. I know it's especially true with basketball, but with football as well. I mean, like it's not like an end all be all, but I think just in terms of kind of rallying the fan base and getting kids that they've seen kind of grow up in the high school ranks, there's a lot of value to that just from the fan perspective. But yeah, I think, Sean, you're right. Internally, it's not for a lack of effort. If kids don't want to come here, they don't want to come here. And I think a lot of it too is Nebraska needs to start winning. Yeah. These kids have grown up their entire lives. Nebraska hasn't even been a contender. It's an issue.
And NIL is a factor, but I still think Nebraska can do what's necessary in any guy. And this market is kind of NIL, in my opinion, has kind of corrected itself over the course of the last few years. And, there's a roster. Shannon Terry talks about this all the time. 90+% of NIL is roster value. It's not true NIL money. And, what is the roster value of a Florida State player versus a Nebraska player versus a Missouri player versus an A&M player? That's what we don't know. But these players kind of sign an entry-level roster value type deal with these programs. And, if you're Chase Loftin and you're Christian Jones, you're probably testing that market a little bit, trying to get a feel for what that roster value is at all these places too.
Sure, for sure, Sean. I mean, the way I look at Loftin is, I guess I have some disappointment because I watched him. I mean, he's good. He's a good player. I mean, I know, Sean, you're right. Thomas Fedoni, Carter Nelson. Loftin would fit, though. I mean, you can't have enough good weapons. And Loftin is a weapon. I mean, he's fast for that size. Again, Florida State's talking about splitting him out early in his career.
Mm-hmm.
He's big and fast.
Florida State's having a heck of a recruiting class too.
To me, it's a tough loss because he's so good. I think he's a top player in the state.
Did Carter Nelson impact him at all? I mean, just the fact that you have a guy that's
probably
a similar role is.
Well, and Fedoni.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised at all. Because he and Carter Nelson are pretty similar, Rob. They are.
And with Fedoni, I mean, at least there's an age gap there.
Yeah.
Like with Nelson, you're basically on the heels of him. And
very similar.
I wonder how much that had to do.
Nelson's a better natural all-around athlete, though. I mean,
think so?
He's voted the Nebraska High School Athlete of the Year. He plays 3 sports. Chase Loftin plays 1 sport, I believe. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I just think when you look at the body of work, I've talked to our folks at On3. They said they've never seen a guy with the track accolades and marks and all the events that Carter Nelson got first place in 8 different individual events this year.
I'd just like to have them both. I mean,
then Isaac Jensen next year at Miller South. That's another tight end.
Right.
And somebody on our site said, you know what? Like, I used to get upset about losing a tight, but the state produces so many tight ends. If there's one position where you can afford to maybe lose a local guy, it is tight end.
Absolutely.
Because they recruit. I mean, the number of tight ends in this state, there's more Power 5 tight ends in Nebraska than California last year.
That's wild.
I mean, I don't even know how that's possible.
It's happened, though. That's wild.